farm murders. What is the position of AfriForum on that?
50 farmers or 55 farmers were murdered this year. Doesn't matter if they were black, white, women, men, whatever.
And then the position on NHI.
Does the state really deserve another state monopoly? That's what NHI is.
What's the importance of preserving the Afrikaans language?
If we don't give it the necessary attention and our time and effort that it deserves, then our culture will go down with the language.
Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome back to the show. In today's session, we're going to be going into AfriForum, what it's about, objectives, and some of the misconceptions. Here to give us insight is none other than Mr. Ernst Van Zyl, who is the head of public relations. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on, TJ.
Not easy. So, can you give us a bit of a breakdown as to who you are and how you got into this journey and
Me
why
personally?
AfriForum? Yeah, you personally.
So I was born in Malmesbury. It's a small town just outside of Cape Town in the Western Cape. Went to school there, went to university in Stellenbosch. And I mean, for some perspective for some of your viewers that are from the big city, we all know if you've ever visited or seen photographs of Stellenbosch, it's not a big city. It's a largish town. But for me, coming from Malmesbury going to Stellenbosch, that was like, I'm in a big place now. This is a large population here. And when it came to moving here eventually to Pretoria, to the north, it was a big change because I'd lived my entire life in the Western Cape, Malmesbury and Stellenbosch, and now moving specifically to join up with AfriForum, to come work for AfriForum. Coming to the big city was a big adaptation for me, but at the same time, this is where the stuff is happening. Here's where the guys with plans are, the people making big moves on the national stage. You have to be to really slot in and make a difference. So I was willing to do it, and it was a very good choice now in retrospect.
What is AfriForum? Objectives, origin? Yeah.
So AfriForum starts in 2006. Now, for people my age or in our generation, 2006 doesn't immediately sound too long ago until you realize it's like, I think my math might be off here a little bit, 18 years now, I think. Oh yeah, I think it's 18 years ago.
It's 18.
It's a while back. It's not just 4 years ago anymore. But yeah, 2006, AfriForum starts. We are at that moment still, I think, an organization with 3 members and 3 people. Two of them are still at the organization. Kali Krill is the CEO and Deputy CEO Alana Bailey. And from there, we grew into what we are today, an organization with 315,000 members. But it wasn't a journey that happened overnight. Now, a lot of people, when they ask AfriForum about they want to emulate what we're doing, they want to create organizations like AfriForum, we'll immediately throw the cold water on the conversation by saying this is something that takes time. It's not something you build overnight. This is building an organization that lasts, building an organization that's built on solid ground is something that takes time, effort, and patience. It's not something that you just throw together and then you're in the success. So what we're doing today is light years in front of what we were doing 18 years ago, where, for example, 18 to 15 years ago, we had the capacity to fill maybe a dozen potholes or 3 potholes. Now we have the capacity to fill thousands in a year. We, at that time, in I think 2012, only in 2012, 6 years after starting, we had the capacity to have like a proper neighborhood watch, our first one. Now we've got 175 by this point. So it's the same principle over and over again, where it takes time to build something that lasts, but if you're willing to wait, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and the patience, it's absolutely worth it.
No, shout out for the community work. But I guess the natural question would be why would you take your time out of doing whatever you wanted to do or could have been doing to saying, hey, I'm going to fill potholes, I'm going to have community services. Why?
So from the AfriForum side as an organization, I mean, I don't think I've ever met a South African that can deny, or that will attempt to deny, that we have serious problems when it comes to things that the government should be doing. That's everything from maintaining infrastructure, filling potholes, planting trees, preventing and fighting crime, fighting corruption, making sure that communities all across the country are safe, clean, and functioning. There's a lot of a big void being left there, a lot to be desired even. And within that context is where AfriForum's philosophy comes to the fore of like, well, you have two choices. You can either complain about it, make a nice social media post, a lot of angry emojis, really with some exclamation marks, caps lock even, show you're really, really angry now.
We see a lot of that on X.
You can do that and wait and see if the government reacts, or you can, after years, maybe even decades of waiting for that problem to be solved. I mean, let's say you've had a pothole in front of your house now for 8 years now. The government's not coming to fill that pothole. There's probably a second or a third one that's already formed in that time. Now you can either again just continue to complain, or you can actually do something about it. That's where our slogan, "Ons ourself," we'll do it ourselves, comes from. It's a slogan based in the idea that at some point you just have to do it yourself. You can't fix all the problems in your community overnight, but you can maybe solve one of them or two of them. Let's say, the best example is just this pothole filling that we do. We do thousands of potholes. We fill thousands of potholes all across the country every year. But it's not something where you go to you identify a problem in your community and you're like, well, I'm just going to fundraise all this money and then we're going to fix this within a week. Like, no, the central premise behind how we do what we do is you see how many people in your community you can organize around. Firstly, here's the problem. We can all see this is the problem. Secondly, what are we going to do about it? Maybe you don't have the money or the manpower to fill 1,000 potholes that year or 500 potholes, but maybe you can get enough money, pool enough money together to fill 5 potholes. That's 5 less potholes in the main street of your town. That's going to actually save a lot of people, a lot of money spent on tires that they have to replace. So when it comes to our problem-solving model, it's a problem-solving model based on do what you can with what you have. There's this quote from Flabase, the head of the Solidarity Movement, which AfriForum is part of, and we can get into that now. He has this great quote where he says, you make big money using small money. So you pool small money together, people's money that they can spare, and when you pool it together, you can actually make something big with it. And that's the philosophy, very at the center. You say you want to make something complex simple. That's the simple idea behind what we do.
How do I go about getting your guys' assistance with that particular pothole?
When it comes to the filling of potholes all across the country, we get that done using our branches. So we have about, at this point, I think, 175 branches, I think, nationwide. And wherever there's a branch, you can use that branch as almost like a node to start solving problems in that community. We don't have a branch in every community all across the country. We have a branch where we could get enough people together to form a branch. So in your community, if you don't have an AfriForum branch there or any organization doing this type of work, that is a rallying call that you're going to have to start organizing your community, start getting people organized around 1, 2, or 3 problems that are center stage that you can realistically fix. So now let's say your community has a new hospital needs to be built. Now, that's not practical for the community just to organize and build. But let's say your community has a problem where the park where the children play doesn't have trees creating shade for them. That's something that your community can do. So it starts off again going back to that simple idea of you do what you can with what you have, not what you ideally would want to do from day one. So to get back to your question, just as a wrap up, you have a problem in your community that you want solving. There's not an AfriForum branch there yet. You can either organize enough people to start an AfriForum branch there, or you can start a. Excuse me.
The minimum number required to start a branch.
I'm gonna have to. I remember the minimum amount to start a neighborhood watch is I think 30. I can't remember now off the top of my head amount for to start a branch, but it's probably in that area between 30 and 30, 40 or 50, somewhere there. Or like I said, you can either start an AfriForum branch there, or you can start a similar organization.
Okay. And now there's a perception that it is a purely Afrikaner community only. How true, not true is that?
So AfriForum as an organization is very clear in regards to what our foundational principles and pillars are. Firstly, we are a Christian organization, non-negotiable. Secondly, we are an Afrikaans-speaking organization. So, for example, everyone that works at AfriForum can speak Afrikaans, and that is the way we communicate with our branches as well. And thirdly, we are an organization that firstly fights for the rights of minorities in South Africa, with particular focus on the Afrikaner community. So it is an organization that has a strong cultural character, a strong linguistic or language character, and a strong religious character. These are things that if we wanted to become much larger, make a lot more money, we could just become more generic, become more broad tent. Like anyone, any cause will support, any stance will take. We just want your votes or your money. But that's not what we do. We have a very clear identity, but that identity is not restrictive in the sense where we only help communities if there's a majority of Afrikaners living there, or it's we only fill a street that is only used by Afrikaners. It's rather we have a focus on helping the communities where the majority of our members are, because without those members, to become an AfriForum member, you have to be a donating member. So it's not like a Facebook page that you like and now you're a member. You have to donate a minimum of 30 Rand per month to be an AfriForum member, which means that we prioritize the communities where our members are the largest amounts of our members live, because it's their financial donations that make what we do possible. So that's the identity side of what we do, the cultural petrol in our tank that makes us so successful.
With regards to the Afrikaans component, you guys, there's a strong focus there. What's the importance of preserving the Afrikaans language?
So we as Afrikaners, specifically from a cultural perspective, without our language, we don't really have a culture anymore. The Afrikaans language forms an integral, critical part of our cultural identity. It is the language that all Afrikaners speak. And at the same time, it's also, we realize that if our children it's almost like our language is almost like a treasure that we want to give to the next generation as well. The thing about languages is once it's gone, it's pretty much gone. You can try to bring it back, but to bring it back, you won't really bring back the real thing. You'll bring back something that's almost like an imitation of the real thing. And Afrikaans, this is a fascinating history that your listeners can go research on their own time, is the two language movements that happened amongst Afrikaners in the past 200 years, where we went from Afrikaans being just a language that we spoke, but not really a language that we wrote in, or had written works in, or literature in, or could study in, or do your PhD in. And then we realized we have to take this language from just a casual speaking language to the highest level if we really want to be serious about our mother tongue. And that's what we did. In the past 100 years, I think only 3 languages have been developed from the most basic speaking level to the highest academic level, and one of them is Afrikaans.
The other two?
The other two, I think the other one is Hebrew, and the third one, I can't remember off the top of my head. If you Google just that fact, you'll get it immediately. So, and I mean, that was coming from a place of us realizing that language forms such an integral part of our identity, of our culture. If we don't give it the necessary attention and our time and effort that it deserves, then our culture will go down with the language. And the other thing is, on a more practical level, every single study shows that people or children that are educated in the language that they think, their first language, outperform children that are taught in their second language in every test, in every study. So, I mean, there's the first reason that I gave is more of the cultural, sentimental side of it, but the practical side is if you want your children to have the best quality education, you should be fighting that they are educated in the language that they think. I mean, physics and math are hard enough. I mean, to have to be educated in a second or even a third language in these subjects that are so difficult is it really makes a big difference in the outcomes of what children get when it comes to education. So I mean, that's the practical side of it. That's why, and we'll get into this later as well, that's why we put so much focus on, firstly, education in Afrikaans, making sure that there are still schools and opportunities where our children can get educated in their first language. And then secondly, building more opportunities, but not asking the state to build these opportunities, but rather asking the government, but rather doing it ourselves. That's why we built Soltech. That's why we are building the Academia campus, university campus for Afrikaans students. And it all comes down to those two reasons. The one reason that our culture will not survive if our language doesn't survive. And then secondly, that if your children are being educated in their third or fourth or second language, then the results just are much worse than if they were taught in their first.
So I assume that becomes one of the bases for having the publishing and the film company. Mm-hmm. The prosecution, department. Yeah. The prosecution department. How did that come about? What's the intention there? Again,
it comes down to that philosophy of there's a void that the government is not filling, and if that void is leaving a very negative effect on the society, someone has to do it. And I mean, the private prosecution unit comes specifically within the climate of a National Prosecution Authority not prosecuting some people, or not people that should be prosecuted being looked over, or not being not facing justice that they deserve. And that's where our private prosecution unit comes in. So it's not a prosecution unit where this is the big high-profile case, so you have to do it as well. It's specifically the people that where there are not cases being, where there should be a case, but there's not a case, or where there should be an investigation, where there's not an investigation. So a good example would be the Senzo Mayiwa case, where our private prosecution unit is not the primary entity behind that case, but we helped with the investigation because there was a big gap in how the investigation was being done, and we thought that we could definitely lend a hand there, because when we made the decision on whether we should get involved, I mean, we were approached by the Mayiwa family, and we thought, well, here, this is the gap. What we're seeing here is that if this can happen to a high-profile athlete like a Bafana player, and there's no justice in that type of case, what type of chance does a regular South African have? And that's an example of a gap that needs to be filled by someone, and we do it to the best of our ability.
The funding model, how do you guys do it?
Sure. So it's a membership model. You can become an AfriForum member. Anyone can become a member, but the only requirement is that you have to be a donating member. So as I said earlier, it's not like just a form that you fill in, name, surname, telephone number, and you become a member, or liking a Facebook page. It's actually becoming a donating contributor to what we do. So we have 315,000 members at this moment. When I started working there in 2019, we had about 200,000 members. And all of those people are quite aware about where their money goes. They can just go to our website, to news or press releases, and see. I mean, we release a press release almost on a daily basis on some project that we've done or something that we've done in a community. And that's the philosophy, or that's the model that we base it on. So we don't get like funding from billionaires or big organizations or from the private sector really, or none from the government. All our funding comes from regular people giving 30 Rand, 40 Rand, 50 Rand, sometimes 100 or more for the good work that they see we're doing in their communities, or simply the good work that they see we're doing in other communities that they would like to support. And it makes your organization very resilient when it comes to that funding model, because if you're only funded by a handful of billionaires, then one of those billionaires can tell you, I don't like what you're doing here, or you should be doing this, otherwise I'm pulling 50%, 60% of your funding. An organization in that position often doesn't really have a choice. Like, they either give in to that type of demand from that type of a big funder, or they go under as an organization. But AfriForum is not in that position. We have 315,000 members, and 1 or 5 or 10 members telling us that you will go in this or in this direction, or we pull our funding. That's not going to really change the trajectory of the organization. But democratically, if 100,000 of our 300,000 members tell us we don't like this direction where you're going, or we want you to go in this direction, it will actually have an impact on the organization, and we will assess the viability of going in that new direction or stopping the direction that a very large chunk of our members didn't agree with. And I mean, that's a much more comfortable position to be in, where 1, 2, or 3 benefactors or donators can call all the shots. Then you're not really an organization that can determine its own destiny. Then you're at the whim of whatever little elite minority is giving you money.
So what you've explained now is largely how most of our political parties are funded. So you guys have got the ideal way as to how to be funded, how to get a mandate. What stops you guys from actually putting your hand up and going into the political?
Because AfriForum comes from a environment of frustration with political parties. Now, it's not the key driver behind what we do, but it's one of the drivers where South Africans, and particularly minorities in South Africa, like the Afrikaner minority, are just frustrated with political parties not really bringing about real change in our communities, not solving the problems that we urgently need solving. If that was not the scenario, if party politics was the be-all and end-all of solving problems, we would not come to the conclusion that our slogan should be, we'll do it ourselves. Otherwise, I mean, that's directly flowing from an unresponsive political environment. So when it comes to why don't you just become a political party, because then we'd have to start acting like a political party, which means you change your stances as the wind blows. And if I were working for that type of organization, at the end of the month, I might be told, well, we just did this polling. The voters actually want this. So we're going in this direction now. We're abandoning this principle. And that's not the environment that AfriForum really would thrive in. We would disintegrate as an organization, because our strength comes from the fact that we have a very clear foundation of what we stand for, what we want to achieve, and we don't deviate from our foundation. We deviate in small tactical or strategic ways in regards to how we want to get to our goals, but when it comes to our core principles, we don't change them. And I mean, to become a political party would be the antithesis of that. It would mean to become almost like a slave to the political tides or winds of the time. And I mean, your audience listening, I don't even have to name examples, can think of any political party, and they will probably be able to think of quite a few examples where that party completely changed their policy, went in a radical different direction, or just acted very bizarrely because one poll showed that this is a key issue and you have to take a strong stance on this issue, even though it has nothing to do with that party's core. So that's what we try to avoid.
With that said, especially around how the electoral system is continuously changing, the provision for independence, particularly in local governments, where we could get a ward councillor that's actually responsible for those day-to-day issues, would you guys not be able to have a bigger impact and direct impact? I mean, you guys have done well, but in terms of accelerating that, you don't think that could be an avenue?
Well, we use that avenue by being in contact with those types of local government structures or individuals that actually want to work with us. So at the same time, we're filling potholes, planting trees, doing our neighborhood watches, making our communities safer, cleaner, better. And if the local government wants to support us and cooperate with us in that regard, it's all the better. I mean, the best example would be our neighborhood watches. Our neighborhood watches actually have a fantastic relationship with local police stations on the ground. I can't think of one example where one of our neighborhood watches has like serious clashes with the local police station. The local police are completely overwhelmed by the crime epidemic in South Africa, and they're just happy for any form of help that they can get. So when an AfriForum neighborhood watch, for example, gets started in a town and they inform the local police department, like, hey, we're also patrolling these streets, everything we do is legal, you can come check us out and we'll help you with any type of support that you need. The local police are usually there. Almost 100% of the time, their reaction is just, well, thank you very much for the help. We'll definitely be in contact. So we have very good relationships with not only on a crime fighting level with local political structures or with local structures like police stations, but also on solving problems like, for example, planting trees, filling potholes, maintaining infrastructure. But the more cooperation we can get with local political structures, it only accelerates what we can do, and we are working on many such agreements at the moment.
Yeah. Before we go into other issues, right?
Sure.
You touched on the whole crime aspect, which farm murders. What is the position of AfriForum on that?
So here's I think a detail that as I get older, or as I work longer and longer for AfriForum and having to speak on issues like farm murders, I realize there's one key issue or one part of our stance that really needs to be clarified every time. So there's this thing called priority crimes in South Africa. You can go look it up. It's very easy to find. It's a list of crimes that are characterized or categorized as crimes that deserve special attention, special units, special strategies because of their unique nature.
Okay.
Just some examples. Yeah, cash and transit heists, poaching or rhino poaching specifically, gang violence, gang crime, and the list goes on. AfriForum's stance is very simple. We want farm murders to be included in that list of priority crimes. But like I said, why this is what I've realized over time is why this is important to explain is the normal person hears priority crime and they immediately think priority means our stance is farm murders needs to be the priority, like nothing else matters. It's the priority crime. Maybe they should think of a better name for that list. But anyway, I think that's the big misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up, is the fact that AfriForum's stance is that farm murders are a unique type of crime that deserve a unique type of reaction, just as the long list of priority crimes already has. And I mean, this is the thing, is that when it comes to things like, for example, priority crimes like cash and transit heists, gang violence, rhino poaching, there's no controversy around it. But when it comes to specifically the farming community being affected, then suddenly it becomes controversial, even though the very concept of a priority crime has existed for a long time. And if you want to go into it, I can explain why farm murders are actually a unique crime phenomenon. And the big frustrating thing when it comes to this particular crime phenomenon is the fact that our very radicalized political environment has, for some reason, or we can speculate on the reasons, appears to have designated farm murders as just this crime phenomenon that you shouldn't even talk about, shouldn't even try to engage with, because it's, for some reason, firstly, either there's outright claims like denialism of it doesn't exist, or secondly, it's not as bad as it is being made out to be, or in the worst cases that it is. The second one is where it's not as bad as it is when people write it off as just normal crime. And then thirdly, the worst case is where radicals classify it as something that the farmers deserve because they're on stolen land and their ancestors committed all these crimes, so therefore they deserve it. So that's the environment that we operate in. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of misconceptions and a lot of pushback against it. A simple demand as we just want equal treatment when it comes to this crime phenomenon, as we see with many other crime phenomenons on that list.
Do you know what the stats are?
The stats, what specifically?
With regards to farm murders.
So last year, I think the farm murder stats last year, under correction by 1 or 2 or 3, it was in the range of, I think, 50 last year. And the year before that, I think about also 55 there in that region. I can get you the stats as well. We publish the stats every year from AfriForum's side. So if you search AfriForum farm murder stats and the year, you get all the detailed stats. But last year it was in the range of between 50 and 55.
Sorry, 55 families is a lot. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now,
just a quick perspective. Some people might say, well, that's 55, that's not so much, but you can take the profession of farming. I think South Africa has about 30,000 commercial farmers the last time I checked. But put any type of other profession in that stat and it suddenly becomes a lot more alarming. I mean, imagine if it was 55 teachers or 55 politicians or 55 journalists that were murdered in a year. That really changes things when you just swap the profession. But for some reason, when it's farming, that's the profession, then it's for some reason not so serious. I mean, this is the one other misconception, is that those stats that we collect, we don't collect them based on race, or like only if it's an Afrikaans farmer, only a white farmer. It's 50 farmers or 55 farmers were murdered this year. Doesn't matter if they were black, white, women, men, whatever.
Does it work both ways in terms of farmers and farm workers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do have a breakdown of our stats into if you go into the details, there's a lot more breakdown of what day did it happen, what was the specific role of this farm murder victim, but it's not just the main farmer on the farm. If it's a farm worker as well that was murdered, then it's also a farm murder, and it's also categorized in the stats.
And what's the position of AfriForum on land? Land, it's the current situation, land redistribution.
Right.
What's your guys' stance on it?
So firstly, AfriForum's stance is that there is a system in place that should correct any wrongs committed in the past where someone's land was forcibly taken by the previous regime. That system is called the restitution process. And I mean, that system already exists. It has existed for decades now. But the system has a very simple premise. If you have evidence that you were dispossessed by the previous regime, you can submit a land claim, and then that claim is investigated, and if your evidence is sufficient, then you get your land back. But the problem with that system is the fact that it has been completely derailed by corruption and by mismanagement from the government side. So AfriForum is in complete support of that system, where the restitution system of here's proof of dispossession, and here's how you get your land back that you were dispossessed of. We are, however, not in support of expropriation without compensation, where a piece of land is simply targeted because the government wants to redistribute it. Doesn't matter whether it's based on this is a land that was previously dispossessed or this is land that was illegally acquired. It's just the expropriation without compensation very clearly boils down to the government can designate any piece of land, they can expropriate it, give whoever is owned that land zero money for that as compensation, and then they can redistribute that land to whoever they want. And as we've seen in Zimbabwe and actually in South Africa as well, a lot of the land that the government has redistributed has often landed in the hands of not people that were previously dispossessed, but rather those with the right political connections or those that are closely tied to the ruling party itself.
So we know that the land is a big... land is one of the fundamental bases in terms of capital and building.
It's, however, not what the majority of people want based on the stats from the government itself. So the government stats show that when it comes to the restitution process so far, more than 90% of those that prove that their land was taken from them, they rather wanted financial compensation rather than the land itself.
Okay.
So, that's just a stat that I think is often overlooked by people, is that it's not. But that stat shows for something very specific, and that is, it's not particularly about specifically getting land. It's about getting access to capital or a way to actually build a better life for you. So when given the opportunity to choose, which the restitution process does, you can either get the piece of land that you were dispossessed of back, or you can get the monetary value of it. More than 90%, according to the government's own statistics, choose the monetary compensation.
And I assume this is largely based because of those that do have the claim that generally are not that financially well off.
Then you have to go be a farmer. Most people don't. Who do you know that wants to go be a farmer? You can, rather than take, I can see someone given that option, say, well, I'm going to take this amount of money that land is worth, and I'm going to go start a business in somewhere where I currently live, or I'm going to use that money to invest in some venture, or I'm going to use it to start a new project somewhere else. It gives you a lot more versatility. Then you get that piece of land. Now it's probably just an empty piece of land, or it's a land that's been developed for something very specific. So if it's been developed for something very specific, you have to become that type of farmer to get anything from it. Or if it's an empty piece of land, now you have to develop it. You're not going to be compensated with, and here's money to develop that land as well. So, I mean, I can completely understand the majority of people look at that. And they're like, I'd rather take the money and I can do it whatever I want with it. Usually start a business or buy a piece of property closer to where I want to live rather than somewhere isolated
Then, with regards to Triple B, what's AfriForum's position on that?
So AfriForum stance, again, in very simple terms, is that there shouldn't be discriminatory laws that bar people from either promotion or getting hired in at a certain place of employment. Which the most clear and blatant example we saw, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, with that internal memo from Dis-Chem that was leaked, where the CEO just outright stated that to meet these race criteria or BEE criteria, we have to put like a total stop or a moratorium, a ban in simple terms on any hiring or promotion of white people at this company, or face massive fines from the government. So that's something that AfriForum is completely against. But I mean, in regards to the vicious cycle that's created there is, I think, a key component of this. So when the government says we are striving towards being a non-racial society, but we have to have these race laws until wrongs of the past have been resolved, what's actually happening is they're creating this vicious cycle where they say, well, until we solved the inequality and poverty and service delivery problems, which are the government still attribute rather completely to the past rather than their own legacy at this point. The logic then goes, until these problems are solved, it means we still have free reign to have these discriminatory laws. And when these problems are solved, then we can do away with these laws. But then the very simple question is, what if you as a government are just completely catastrophically failing at solving these problems? Well, then the excuse or the premise to have these discriminatory laws just continues infinitely, where in theory, then my great-great-great-grandson will still be discriminated against by these laws if the government continues on its current trajectory. So you can't use the solving of the real problems that South Africa faces. You can't use the question of whether when those problems are solved, then we will do away with racially discriminatory policies, because the government is clearly not solving those problems, which means you just have a get-out-of-jail-free card to keep on discriminating from the government side forever. I mean, that's how we got into this situation where we still have 141 race laws on the books in South Africa, 116 of which went through Parliament after 1994. Okay.
Understand that. How would you guys go about redressing the economy and the inequality then?
Well, that's another hour or 2 hour conversation, but I'll condense. The whole premise of your show is to condense mega complex ideas into as simple as possible. So I think the best place to start, I can actually just use a personal example. I mean, we talked before we started recording. I went to a normal public school, nothing fancy, and I mean, I can tell you from my experience in South African public school, is that you are taught to be one thing in South African public school, and that is to be a job seeker, not a job creator. The entire curriculum in South Africa, well, I haven't studied the South African school curriculum in quite a while, but when I was in school, it was particularly focused just on here's the tools you need to become a good job seeker, not a job creator. So I think the first place to start is to fix the education system, where it's unacceptable that in 2024 you still have, I think, hundreds of schools, if not thousands of schools in this country that have inadequate infrastructure, things like pit toilets or not even proper sanitary infrastructure. Schools even where children don't have proper classrooms, where they're either sitting in like make do or makeshift like asbestos little shipping containers, or they're sitting under literal trees having to walk through rivers to get to their school. These are the problems you need to be solving to solve many of the key issues that I think no one you'll find can deny. Problems no one in South Africa will deny these are real issues. The unemployment crisis, the crisis of South Africa, the education system not producing the skilled South Africans we need to actually be job creators. And I mean, that's where we start. That's why the key foundation to solving the unemployment crisis in South Africa would be to have our education system teach children not just to be, when they leave school, now you can go look for a job. When you leave school, here's the tools you need to actually start be an employer rather than just an employee. And like I said, I can say that from my own experience. I mean, I was taught in school to be a job seeker. Yeah.
I fully understand, fully agree with that component. However, I'd say that from a business perspective, one of the biggest issues then becomes access to market. And I believe that is one of the intentions. How well it's been done, different story. But that would be one of the intentions behind the whole triple BEE. How would AfriForum rather have that tool or that intention be implemented?
So you do that by actually growing the pie rather than just fighting about what percentage of the demographic makeup of your country is employed by, or where the fight is about a shrinking pie. You rather should be expanding it. So take, for example, some of the biggest companies that you can think of in South Africa. Most of them are over 100 years old, if not close to or close to 100 years old. The only real big one I can think of that started in the past few decades that's really gotten to the top level is probably Capitec. And the rest, Sanlam, Santam, Afbob, all these organizations, they all started 100 years ago. Where are these new industries coming to the fore? And I mean, that's what you need to be doing. We can't just be, the conversation can't just constantly be about the employment practices of a handful and a shrinking amount of big companies in South Africa. There should be new companies. What you build, you define. So, I mean, that's the only way. Otherwise, in the end, way things are going, and in 20, 30 years, the conversation will still be about the employment practices of the top 5 banks and the top 3 investment companies and the top 2 insurance companies, and nothing would have changed. So, but that comes back to that philosophy of not just creating job employers or job creators, but creating an entrepreneurial focus on here's the tools that you need to start the next big ABSA or Old Mutual or Investec. And at the moment I don't see that happening. At the moment I see a fight about who this handful and shrinking amount of companies should be hiring and how their hiring practices should be looking. And I mean, based on race, and it's not sustainable. That's not how you solve a 40% unemployment rate. That's how you shift around the chairs on the Titanic. That's not really a expanding or fixing the sinking ship or actually building something similar to the ship. You're just fighting about a shrinking pool of opportunities, and that's not sustainable.
Okay. And then the position on NHI. Where does AfriForum stand?
So, I can give you a stance, but just a quick note there. In the future, you should definitely invite my colleague Louis Boshoff on as well. He's from AfriForum, and his particular focus is NHI and health-related issues. But
I hope you're hearing this. We're going to reach out and schedule
yeah, sure.
that. Okay.
And so particularly there, again, it's to make it as simple as possible. When you look at every other state-owned enterprise, whether it be Eskom, the post office, Transnet, our ports and railway systems, does the state really deserve another state monopoly? That's what NHI is. The NHI is the monopolization of healthcare in South Africa by the government. But the government has proven that it can't do anything. Every state-owned enterprise seems to be on a downward trajectory, except SARS, because you have to keep the money flowing. But everything else, post office, Eskom, Transnet, all the critical SOEs that the government is holding on to, are not proving that the government is able to handle these types of monopolies. So, I mean, I don't think the government deserves another one, and that's AfriForum's stance: is that centralizing another industry under the watch of the government is just going to create another disaster and another black hole where money gets thrown into and nothing really gets produced. So rather use the billions, if not trillions, that the government plans to use to start or build NHI. Use that money to actually fix the completely dysfunctional public healthcare system. And we have massive capacity issues in our public hospitals. Fix that. Why do you want to build something completely new that from all indicators is going to be a massive failure, rather than actually using that money to fix something that exists? It's like saying Eskom has failed until this point, we're going to build Eskom 2. Like, no, fix Eskom 1. And when it comes to NHI, fix the public hospitals that already exist, rather than spending trillions and trillions more to give the government another monopoly that it doesn't deserve.
When one looks globally, the NHI model is something that a lot of countries have taken up. And we had an interview with Professor Nicholas Crisp, who's heading NHI, as one of the things of the resource allocation in terms of goes to private versus public is disproportionate, where the bulk goes to minority, and it's essentially trying to fix that. But once again, I do acknowledge that the government, I mean, we've seen Eskom, there's no two ways about it being fixed.
It's not a practical example, but it is a principal example. I would challenge the government, fix the post office, and then after you've fixed one SOE, we can talk about a second and a third and a fourth. And then the same with NHI is like proof and concept. Show us that that the government can actually. I mean, the healthcare system that is in place is the best example. If the government can prove that it can effectively run and fix the public healthcare system in this country, then people might actually be open to the conversation about building a expanded government presence when it comes to healthcare. But at the moment, like I said, if you can't run a post office, you can't run a hospital, and that's what the government's currently proving.
Yeah. There's a misconception that I've had for the longest time. AfriForum and Freedom Front Plus, that they were one thing. What's the relationship?
Yeah. So we don't have a relationship to any political party. So there's no political party that's affiliated with AfriForum. AfriForum is part of what we call the Solidarity Movement. So the Solidarity Movement is a network of 51 institutions or organizations. Just to name some, AfriForum is the civil rights component within that network. Solidarity is the labor union component. Helping Hand is our welfare component. Soltech is our technical college component. Academia is our university component, and the list goes on and on. So, but none of those organizations are a political party. They're all community-based organizations that you don't vote for. You either get involved there, or you support them financially with a donation, or you don't. But when it comes to political parties out there in the South, I mean, how many do we have now? 52 or more, 55? I've lost track. So. There's no political party that has an official affiliation with AfriForum. We work with any political party that's willing to support us in our community-based initiatives or institutions. That is any political party that's willing to help create the environment that is conducive, or environment that is friendly towards we'll do it ourselves type of projects, rather than saying you're not allowed to do any of this, the government will handle it, even if the government clearly can't handle it. So that's why we don't have a particular party, but any party that is willing to work with us, we'll have a conversation with.
Lastly, what misconceptions or narratives are out there that you would like to be clarified with regards to AfriForum?
I would say the biggest one is particularly what drives us. So I think the misconception, or rather confusion out there, is a lot of people see what we're doing and they genuinely are confused. They're saying, but why would you put so much focus into this? Why would you put so much money into this? And my simple answer there is sometimes material drives are not the primary drive of why an organization or a community does things. For example, our language policy of strictly communicating exclusively in Afrikaans in our organization is not a very, from a financial perspective, is not the best or effective strategy. If you want to have broad appeal, you should be English. I mean, that's a clear business strategy that if AfriForum was just profit motivated, we'd be focusing on becoming completely English and just becoming a generic English organization, or English first language organization, completely ceasing our fight for Afrikaans and for preserving our language. But we don't do that. And a lot of people working at AfriForum, I would say even the majority of people working at AfriForum, could be making a lot more money in other private sector ventures. They could be using their skills elsewhere for a lot more better and larger income. But they don't do that. They work for AfriForum for being part of something bigger, not for material gain, but rather for a community gain and a sense of belonging somewhere, and a sense of bringing about real change. And I mean, that's from my personal perspective. I mean, like I said, I could be working for some corporate entity and probably making a lot more than I do now at AfriForum, but I would also not have the same job satisfaction and the same fulfillment and being excited to go to work every day, because I can see the thing about the big benefit of working for an organization like AfriForum is I can see the time and effort that I put in being manifest out there in real world change. And I get the emails and the messages of people saying, thank you for doing this. Thank you. We saw your organization in our community this week, or we saw you do this, and thank you for this help. And that's that petrol in our tank. That was what keeps me and my colleagues going. It's not about a business opportunity, but rather an opportunity to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I mean, that's maybe a little bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen as well with people all across the world, is that sometimes the material drive is not the thing that you should just be blindly pursuing, of like, I just need to be doing the job that gives me the most money. Or it's not, I don't really have the time or money to support anything in my community. I should just be focusing on my own personal life. Well, if that is your perspective, then you're actually missing out on a lot of fulfillment and a sense of being part of something bigger that you could be doing very easily. So, I mean, this is the advice that I gave on Penwell's show as well, is that there's this weird misconception, not particularly to AfriForum, but amongst South Africans and amongst people abroad as well, that this question about what can I do? What difference can I really make? I don't have enough money to donate 1,000 Rand to a good cause, or volunteer for 20 hours a month or a week at some good cause. Well, I mean, that's how you make real change, but that's not true. Real change happens small amounts. It happened, like I said earlier, you make big money using small money. What AfriForum does is not realized by people donating 100,000 Rand a month or donating 1,000 Rand a month even. It's realized through people donating 30 Rand a month. That's the equivalent of I think a bottle of beer. And since I've stopped smoking, I don't really keep track of the price of a pack of cigarettes anymore. I think it's probably a half a packet of cigarettes. So, I mean, that's not a real life shattering donation. But with that said, I will absolutely not deny that there are genuinely many South Africans that can't even afford to give a 30 Rand donation a month. That's absolutely true. But just as that is true, the other fact is also true, that there are millions of South Africans that can be making that type of contribution to an organization or a cause that they support and more, but they're not doing it because they're telling themselves, if I give 50 Rand to an organization that does good work or not, what difference is that going to make? So even if you do a small donation or small volunteer work, half an hour a month or an hour a week to a good cause, you're already doing more than most.
Shout out. One last question. I know I said this last time. What advice, or how would you go about advising any other, whether it's racial groups, cultures, etc., to mobilize and do what you guys have done for your community? What advice would you give them?
Well, firstly, I want to put it out there that AfriForum is an open source organization. So when it comes to what we do, the models that we use to achieve what we do, if you want to replicate that in your community, you want to do something similar, you just have to send us an email then and organize a meeting. And we'll sit down and we can chat about how we do what we do. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's all about getting a team together. And a team is literally two people or more. So you identify a problem in your community, and then you have to identify at least one or two other people that are willing to help you solve that problem. Something as simple as litter in your street. You don't have to solve the country's problems tomorrow. You don't have to pick up all the litter in all the streets across the country tomorrow. But you can make sure there's no plastic bottles in your street, or there's no litter in your street. You can make sure that if there's a park close to you where children play and it's just an open piece of land, you can make sure there's a tree planted there that you water once a week, or that you and your neighbors got together and pooled your money to buy or to plant. It's starting with the simple thing. It goes counterintuitive to what we've been taught in school, is this whole idea of like you have to dream big and think big. But I'm here to tell you have to sometimes think small. You have to sometimes think, maybe I can't save the country tomorrow. Maybe I can't save the world, but I can maybe make a difference in my street or in my neighborhood. And that's where you should start. Real achievable goals, rather than giving yourself impossible goals that you'll never be able to achieve. And then when you don't reach those goals in a year, then you give up because you didn't achieve anything. So rather, when you set goals for yourself or for your community, set achievable, realistic goals, do what you can with what you have, and then you work from there. So that's what AfriForum did. Started by filling 1 pothole per month, then 5, then 10. Our first goal wasn't to fill 1,000 potholes every month. We said, okay, here's how much money we have, and this is how much we can do. You do that, get the check mark. Now you can expand by 5 more potholes next month and go from there.
Shout out. Thank you for the work. Thank you for making time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And we'll definitely reach out again for the NHI episode.
100%.
Thanks. Guys, I hope that's been insightful and palatable. Please let us know and comment in terms of what you'd like to hear from who, including our guest here. And yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Same place, same time.